Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at the top 10 most undervalued Sword and Shield cards given this crazy market in which everything is exploding in Pokemon. Particularly the Scarlet and Violet era absolutely lost all manners of calm, from scalping for 151 to literally items disappearing off of the Pokemon Center in every store for the latest sets like Prismatic Evolutions, and for the Pokemon Journey set that's coming out soon, which is going to be the owner's Pokemon variant. There's still some amazing cards that are left undervalued in the Sword and Shield era, and as you can see, there is a lot of things happening in this set. A lot of the cards that you might have seen might be way more expensive than you expected, which is why we're not going to be looking exclusively at altars. We're going to be looking at a lot of different cards. So without further ado, let's kick it off with the number 10 slot. That's going to be Mimikyu V. I believe that these trainer galleries, many of them are absolutely underrated. And unlike the Scarlet and Violet era, there are not hundreds and hundreds, or at least dozens and dozens of these sort of cards. Like in Scarlet and Violet, when it comes to art rares, there are tons. When it comes to the Sword and Shield era, because trainer galleries were introduced much later in the chronology of the Sword and Shield era, I believe it was introduced in the set Brilliant Stars, and that too, there are very few black borders that you can actually pull. They're quite hard to come by, and some are in V and VMAX variants. This is one of those black border cards. I think this is such a sensational artwork. A very popular Pokemon Mimikyu watching TV, scaring the life out of Acerola back there. This is a Sun and Moon duo, if you remember it from the show. She obviously has a ghost-like Mimikyu. It's not an actual Mimikyu, so there's that, but I guess we're just seeing a regular one. And then we have a Gengar on the right over here, very cool, popcorn spilled across. And then we also have this shadow of Mimikyu from the light of the TV, and then a drawing back there too. So it's a very nice detailed artwork, darker theme, almost Halloween-esque. If we take a look at the latest sales, we see that it is constantly staying at the around $20, under $20 range, and this card has been picking up steam over the past 3 months. If you look at the past 6 months, it has been a significant growth period for it, but still, I feel like this is quite an undervalued set, particularly as owner's Pokemon is returning to the Pokemon TCG, but this time, we're getting it more so in the style of what we saw in Gym Challenge and Gym Heroes. Still, we have the artwork which pairs a trainer with a Pokemon. I think there's going to be a resurgence of interest in these types of cards, particularly this Mimikyu V still remains quite undervalued. Next up, this is a card that has dropped significantly from a time when I saw it selling for around $60, $50. That was a time period for this Unown where it was pretty chaotic, pretty crazy. Even if you look at 1 year ago, you see that there was a time when it was going for $31. It has significantly plateaued, jumped back up from its sort of $11 to $13 range, and is going for around $17 now. But still, Unown is a very mysterious Pokemon that isn't very explored in the show or in general. We always have this sort of veil of mystery that surrounds it. The different symbols, which represent letters of the alphabet, and it's very cool that we see them coming out of these runes, almost like, I feel like I almost saw this scene when I was playing Heart Gold, Soul Silver, the remakes during the Gen 4 era. So I'm really happy to see this card. It's very colorful, a simpler artwork, and definitely one that's an acquired taste, but for those who love it, it's a great card. Next up, this is a personal preference for me, and I understand if this is not your card particularly, but I absolutely adore this Empoleon. It's doing some sort of, I guess you can call it martial arts with this Mienfoo in the background, which I suppose is teaching. Then there are a bunch of failings jumping around on Empoleon, one that's literally falling off, and weirdly enough, in an alternate art, this is not common, we're actually seeing the Pokemon overlap on the border, which is quite interesting. We have another failings here. very serene and enjoyable artwork. I love Empoleon. I personally played it during the Platinum era, and it's a personality-driven card, which we don't always see in artworks. We tend to see scenery and everything, and no doubt there is definitely some great scenery in this image, but as we see, it's not super expensive compared to a lot of the cards that are in the Scarlet Violet Sword and Shield era, particularly as we saw in the first page where there were alternate arts going for hundreds and hundreds. This is going for 36 as an alternate art, a pretty solid price. If we go back 6 months ago, it's actually lower than it was, in July from the 23rd to the 29th. So it's not like this was the drop. This was this low and it's all of a sudden jumping. It actually just dropped for some reason in between. But, if I find this card, I will definitely pick it up. Unfortunately, I have not come across it in person. I always like getting good copies of cards which are from the Sword and Shield Scarlet era. So next up, and this is a card that might not seem underrated to many of you, but I will explain why I believe so in a second. So this is a VMAX Shiny Charizard from Shining Fates. We had a non-shiny version that came in Darkness Ablaze, which quickly lost all forms of interest, and it dropped down to very, very low value. Last I saw, it was like 30 or something, which is crazy enough. This card is currently going for $109. I actually picked up quite substantially since October. If we go back even further, we can see that it was around that $80 range for a long time, and it's just jumped up. Still not as substantial as some of the other Charizards, other big Charizards from the set. Of course, VMAXs and VSTARs were something exclusive to the Sword and Shield era. Not to say that it's not going to be revisited, but as you know, there are certain mechanics designed for certain eras, and they're very seldom revisited or not even considered, such as, we haven't seen Delta cards, in forever. We haven't seen Gold Stars in forever, except for those 2 celebration cards which were paying homage to the older sets. So it's not necessarily a common thing, and now that we're out of the era, if you like VMAXs, this is definitely one of the best cards out there. And so the reason I'm saying this is still undervalued for $109, another reason why I say that the Charizard is undervalued for $109.89 is because if we take a look at another set from the Sword and Shield era, we will see that it actually pales in value compared to these two. So as we can see, we have the non-VMAX Shiny Charizard V from Champion's Path, and it goes for, let's take a look at the near mint. Make sure you do that whenever you're on TCG Player. Sometimes it'll just default to lightly play and confuse you. But yeah, so it's at $222. It's been growing. Sort of a similar trajectory. October was really the point where things started to heat up. Just like 151 had that huge jump in October, things were generally heating up in Pokemon, but I suppose Pocket TCG mixing in with, general scalping, flipping and hype, that's just gone out of control now in Pokemon. I guess October is like a sweet spot, for a lot of these cards, or at least some of them, but this one's substantially more expensive, as you can see. And then I still feel like the VMAX Shiny is better from Shining Fates. And then we also have the Rainbow Charizard VMAX from Champion's Path, which is less, which is $184, but still, as you can see, substantially more expensive than the Shining Fates, which is why I justified this Charizard being on my list. Next up, we have the Umbreon Gold Star from Celebrations, and this is the first time we saw Gold Stars in many, many years. It's an acquired taste, but I think a lot of people agree that Gold Stars was a very, very fun, great period for Pokemon. We have, the original trio in Gold Stars. We had the Espeon in Gold Star. So this was just a great card. I love that it's shiny. We have the shiny Umbreon in here because we don't have the yellow, we have the blue. And it's vastly undervalued as well, going for $34. Now, I'm not saying these cards are not picking up in value and this wasn't the sweet spot, but my point is it still hasn't really reached the hype or craze, and it's still relatively unseen by people who are just grabbing cards left, right, and center. Many of these cards are overvalued. In Scarlet Violet particularly, I find many cards overvalued, such as in Surging Sparks. Should that Pikachu have debuted and not dropped from its pre-release price, Like, I don't believe so. It should be far less expensive. Latias as well. Cards must mature over some time before they actually reach such standards and such crazy prices. You know, prismatic evolutions showing beyond surging spark signs. You know, for the Umbreon retailing $2,000 almost USD. So it's really, really crazy at this time. And so if you see cards like this Umbreon Gold Star, a sensational card, you know, evolution, the best or the most loved evolution, as has been reflected monetarily, and it's going for $35, $36, I think that's a great price. So I try and treat it from that perspective. Are there cards that are, I'm not saying $35 isn't a lot, but compared to some of these cards which are going for like hundreds and hundreds, I think this is a reasonable addition to your collection, which would look beautiful. Next up, we have Celebi V, and oh my gosh, this is a gorgeous card. Iconic, Gen 2 legendary. We all know Celebi, and the Forest Guardian is literally doing its thing in this dreary city. It looks so much like a ghost town, where this Celebi is revitalizing this town, which has just become, I guess, destroyed or withered away. We see how the leaves are sprouting out from the branches. Looks very cool. And I love the blue of Celebi's eyes. It's just like pops so much in the entire card, which is relatively muted except for the place where Celebi actually left its little magic going. This is a card that has actually done quite well over the last few months, particularly again that October time frame. I personally purchased this card around here, and when it dropped, I had like no concern whatsoever because I knew this is one of the best cards of the Sword and Shield era. V-wise, it has very few competitors, but regardless, I literally didn't even bother, and you know, as time has shown, it's grown quite substantially, but I still think there's room for it to grow at least, you know, 70 or 75-ish. You know, this is quite a nice card. I mean, that value is just arbitrary, you know, I'm just trying to convey, I believe the card has more room, despite its already, you know, substantial growth period. Moving on to another card, and this one I don't think many people disagree with being undervalued, is the Rainbow Charizard going for $60. A card that once was going for $150 and above. It's now dropped substantially. And one reason I wanted to include this card, apart from, yes, it's dropped substantially, is Charizard. Not just that, rainbows are no longer really a thing. And I'm not going to count Stellars as rainbows. You know, the rainbow border is fun and all, but I don't count that as a rainbow card. You know, this is rainbow, and this is when they stopped. Sword and Shield is the last era where they're going to create rainbows. I mean, they might revisit in the future, but there are no signs of it, at least at the minimum. And so we have this Charizard VSTAR again, another mechanic from Sword and Shield, which may or may not be revisited, and a style of artwork. We always have this little drip over here on the bottom right and top left, which signifies the VSTAR. Usually when you're pulling a pack and you see that sort of gold edge, you know, oh, okay, I got a VSTAR on my hands. But yeah, gorgeous card. Vastly undervalued and has been picking up steam as well since October. Next up, we have a pair of two cards, and I'm going to be showing you both of them. Is another trainer gallery. Again, we're back to trainer galleries. This is Umbreon V from Brilliant Stars, which is going for $34. I think still very undervalued compared to its high back in April when it was going for about $50. Still much room to catch up, and a card that, as an evolution, as Umbreon, is just so stunning. The texture also adds so much vibrance to this card in a fairly muted color palette already. I do enjoy this one a lot. And then we have Sylveon, for those of you who like Sylveon more and actually care about the character. Well, this is Valerie, if you know. She is the gym leader in the Kalos region, the fairy type gym leader. She can communicate with fairy type Pokemon particularly, and is also a fashion designer, I believe, which is kind of random, but it's there. That's just the thing. And if we take a look at prices, sales, we see that's, you know, around 25, a few sales, you know, four sales, $25, 30-ish, you know, in that general vicinity. Still room to climb again. You know, this is a card that has actually overtaken its previous high in the past year, and again, another no-brainer evolution. When prismatic evolutions are selling for hundreds of dollars, and you just want to have evolutions in your set, in your collection, in your binder, you know, you can look back at some of these sets before they explode, and this is one of those. This pairing is like one of those no-brainers for me. Finally, we're at number 2, and this is gonna be Dialga and Palkia alternate art. Now, before y'all are like, well, these cards have already exploded, isn't that enough? They've already blown up in value compared to how they've been just like chilling at $50 for the longest time. And you'd be right, 100% right in that. But my belief is these are some of the most unique and beautiful cards. I'm not including the RCS and the Giratina because they are quite valuable. I do believe that those 2 cards still have room to grow as well. But as the Palkia and Dialga origin forms are much lower, I wanted to bring these up specifically. So if you notice, these are amongst the only alternate art gold cards in the entire Sword and Shield era. In the entire Scarlet and Violet era, there is not really a thing called like gold alternate art. Now, if you want to look back to X and Y, and yeah, there were those gold bordered alternate arts, and I say quote unquote alternate arts because technically that's not what they were called, and you know, yada yada yada. Like for instance, in Breakpoint, you had the Gyarados. For example, this is I guess you can call this a alternate art gold card from the X and Y era where you have the gold border. But if you're talking about full on gold, I mean, this is it. You know, this was absolute peak beauty. Having these in your hands really has no replacement. The image cannot capture how the texture highlights these cards. Particularly if you have the Japanese versions, it is off the charts. And I still feel like $80 is just not it for these cards. They have more room. They have more potential. And whether that's realized in 2 months or 2 years, there is a future for these cards. And if you just want to buy them and have them in your binders and appreciate these cards, while also knowing that there's a high possibility that the market will at least appreciate them at some point, you know, I think these are the cards. Personally, I have collected all of them, except for the RCS, which I have in Japanese form instead, because I just love the Japanese texture so much, you know. But anyway, moving on to the final card, it's going to be Pikachu from Crown Zenith. I don't think there's any arguing here that this deserves the number 1 place. It is a vastly undervalued card for what it is. It is absolutely stunning. English does not have too many of the explosive Pikachu cards. I call these explosive Pikachus because it's always a Pikachu in the center, followed by tons of Pokemon sort of facing different directions, popping out from the background. We had plenty of promos from X and Y and Sun and Moon, but this is one of the first times we really saw this in English as a pullable card. And so the texture just simply destroys any sort of doubt anyone might have about whether they should get the card. I just wish that we didn't have the yellow border. It would make it so much more, I think, beautiful if we had like a gray or black border on it. But you know, no matter at the end of the day. But I remember seeing this card and his eye, Pikachu's eye is just so great. And for me, this card is better than the Surging Sparks Pikachu. If I'm being completely honest, that is like a $400 card. This is a $17 card. And I would take this any day of the week just because I think it's just so vibrant and so alive. Like the card's brimming with energy and Pokemon and so much style, which I love. The pink, the blue splashes, Pokemon from the Sword and Shield era really captivated. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the video today. Let me know if you think I missed any Pokemon cards particularly, or think that certain ones shouldn't have been on the list. I'd love to hear your perspectives, and I'll catch you all in the next one.